Chicago.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Bridging Chicago. During episode 15 of this season, we spoke with Ellen Ray, the CEO of Chicago Cares, and Cecile DeMello, a member of the board of directors of Chicago Cares and the executive director of Teamwork Inglewood. Episode 30 connected us with Rob Pabone, a manager of strategic partnership with Chicago Cares, and Joel Rodriguez, one of the organizers of Southwest Organizing Project, also known as SWAP. On this episode of Bridging Chicago, we continue our series with Chicago Cares and one of their partner organizations by welcoming Patricia Islas, a manager of strategic partnership with Chicago Cares, and Fabian Cisneros, the Community Engagement and Economic Development Manager of Northwest Side Community Development Corporation. Welcome, Patricia and Fabian.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Patricia, maybe we could start with you. So why don't you start by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself? And are you from Chicago? What facilitated your interest in working in the not-for-profit sector? And
Sure.
about your role with Chicago Cares.
Oh, definitely. Thank you. I would love to speak about that. So I always say that I'm like a sandwich with a little bit of bread, peanut butter, and jelly.
Okay.
The reason for that is I was born in a little village here in Chicago, but I spent most of my childhood life up until the early 20s in a small town that maybe some of you have heard, Janesville, Wisconsin.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
the reason that we moved out there when I was very young is because my father got transferred to the General Motors plant in Janesville, Wisconsin. So they're doing a lot of transferring that they either chose Wisconsin or Texas. We chose Janesville because we still have a lot of family and roots here in Chicago. My aunts
Yes.
are here, my cousins are here. And so that's where I grew up most of my childhood life up until the age of 20. So we would travel back and forth, Chicago to Janesville to visit
Mhm.
my aunts and my cousins. But we were the first Mexican family to arrive in Janesville. And I think that it was a huge, huge culture shock for my parents and my older brothers. Um, and so that's where I also, during my probably early 20s, started to think about where do I want my adulthood life to be? Where is it that I want to be able to maybe have a family of my own? And that's where I made a decision that, you know what, I want to go back to Chicago and really be able to be there and have more of a kind of my roots are there and my family's there. So be able to continue to be in Chicago and have a place where I can call home.
Yes.
And so, yeah.
So, what started your interest in the not-for-profit sector?
Yeah. So, when we were in Janesville, I witnessed a lot of racism and discrimination. My mother would come home from work and she would say, I got let go again. I got fired again. It's like, well, what? I was really little, and I was like, what do you mean you got fired again? She's like, well, I got let go because they said I didn't speak. She would always say proper enough English. We come from a Mexican, Latino family, household, immigrant background, and so the number of times that she got fired at work, I had to, I said to myself, there's got to be something that needs to be done. You can't just be firing someone for not speaking the language, could you? Because I was curious about that when I was, little. And so when I started to go into my college journey in Madison, Wisconsin, is when I started to open up my eyes a little bit and find out more about labor rights, workers' rights, and what it means to have a voice in the workplace and what it looks like to be able to have a union. So my father, um, at that time, the UAW, United Auto Workers, he was part of a union. And I always asked myself, well, everyone else should be able to have a union and have a voice at the work in their workplaces. And so that's where I started to think about more during college and being very involved in the on campus, there was a workers' rights center, not even a 5-minute walk for where our campus was. And I decided to start volunteering at this workers' rights center. And that's where my background started in doing labor union organizing and community organizing. And that's
Mhm.
where I started to become more interested in working for the non for profit sector and looking at being able to support work that involves community voice and community engagement.
So, your experience in college, your first volunteer, so to speak, kind of sparked the fire for the future for you.
Yes, that was my first volunteer experience doing service at the Workers' Rights Center. Really, it was an eye opening for me. I was able to make connections with workers from many different parts of the Central America, Latin American country. I was able to also, I think part of our Chicago Cares background is it gave me an opportunity to build awareness around what are workers' right issues and the different ways that workers have rights in the workplace as well.
Mhm. Tell us about your role with Chicago Cares.
Yeah, so my role at Chicago Cares, I'm the manager of strategic partnerships. And so I hold relationships with three different communities. The three are one is in North Lawndale, Hermosa, which is next door to Logan Square, and then our amazing Belmont Cragin neighborhood as well. And so at Chicago Cares, it's important to follow our community partners. And so I truly believe in relationship building with our community partners. That's something that we also believe in at Chicago Care. So I build relationships, I hold relationships with these three main neighborhoods in the city of Chicago. And with that, we're able to kind of follow the lead. It's really important to follow the lead of our community partners. I'm able to be an active listener and think
Yes.
about ways that we can strategize around some of the work that we could do to support around service with our volunteers.
So, Fabian, let's let's learn a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what facilitated your interest in working in the not-for-profit sector.
Yeah, thank you. So I am gonna start off by saying that I am not from Chicago. I was
Okay.
actually born in Arkansas, and I grew up like my entire childhood and part of my adult life, going up to the age of 22. And
Hmm.
so, growing up in Arkansas, very much similar to you, Pati, like we were one of the only Hispanic families in Arkansas in my area growing up until things started to like diversify a little bit, and then I moved to a different city that was about 40 minutes away, and it was predominantly white. Um,
Hmm.
and I really like my course of action was originally going to be, and I say this because like the headquarters of Walmart is in my hometown Bentonville, and so the course of action was just to go to college, get a good job at Walmart. And I was in my last semester of the University of Arkansas and just kind of thought, I don't know if this is necessarily what I want to do. And I think in that moment, or in that time frame, I remember really talking to my mom about like what it was like to go from Mexico to the United States, and how different Mexico was to where we were living now, and like the reasons why she moved there, and talking about wanting to create a better life for me and my brother. And right, I think that kind of like reframed like what work is to me, is like it doesn't necessarily have to be something that is monetary, right? And so
Right.
I actually ended up getting a position at what's called the Student Conservation Association, and I moved to
Hmm.
Alaska, and I was a
Okay.
conservationalist, and I got to work with U.S. Fish and Wildlife. I from there like was it was jumping off point into I guess that technically was like a nonprofit, and so I then went to Maryland for a while. I went to Utah, and worked at Arches National Park. And in those moments, like I was living in my car, just kind of exploring and really trying to be as minimal as possible. And
But it sounds like a great experience.
oh, yeah, it was. I mean, the views, the landscapes. I mean, a lot of
Hmm.
them are on my phone, right? They've taken photos of them, but
Yeah.
they're indescribable. Like I don't have the words to like tell you what it was like to climb up a mountain and see this this viewpoint. And but in those moments, like I really got to just think a lot about, the work that
Mhm.
I want to do and the impact that I want to eventually make. And a lot of that stemming from my childhood of like, right, we didn't have a lot of things growing up, and so like you know what are resources, or where can you meet people where they're at, to
Right.
uplift them. And so when the pandemic happened, I was in Utah at the time, and I finished my work scope there. But I remember thinking of like, right, there is a world, like a global pandemic going on, but as always, right, this is going to burden our black and brown and indigenous folks far greater than it would ever to white people. And I hate to say, just say it plainly like that, but that's how it always goes. And so I remember thinking like, what if my mom or what if my brother, right, were who are a little better off now, but like back then, right, what if it happened when I was a child? And so that really stemmed the need to want to work predominantly in a Hispanic community,
Mhm.
and wanting to be in Chicago. I just interviewed. I became an AmeriCorps Vista, and with my current organization, the Northwest Side CDC. Which is a little
Okay.
easier to say than Community Development Corporation. So you
Yeah.
can use our shorthand if you'd like. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, so being in AmeriCorps Vista, I did a lot of background and data work of like, we were a fairly new organization. I think we were up and running for about a year and a half. We had just gotten an executive director that was 6 months earlier than I was. And so it was really like, okay, what impact do we want to make? And so the work that I did was a lot of, finding where the course of action we should go, led by my executive director. And then I would find data to back that up. Is that actually the way we should do it? Or, getting new banners in the neighborhood, like creating a sense of community, like making sure that there's resident engagement in everything that we do.
So was that part of your training from AmeriCorps Vistas?
Um,
Or
yes and no. I think it was more of like the just making sure that we were building capacity in the organization that we were at. But
okay.
really, I do attribute a lot of my professional development and my community organizing experience with the Northwest Side CDC, and then our partner organization, the Northwest Center.
Okay.
Hmm.
So Fabian, can you tell us more about Northwest Side CDC and its mission?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think our tagline is development without displacement. And our mission is to provide resources to the Northwest side of Chicago, but very specifically and very intentionally on Belmont Cragin. And that
Okay.
is through the use of business advising, different resources that we have through classes, through incubators, which we could talk about later, and then also landlords and tenants, and just making sure that both sides know their rights, and right,
Hmm.
creating a relationship that is healthy as opposed to one overbearing the other.
Right. So
And
you work with both sides of the party, the tenant as well as the
right,
landlord.
yeah, making sure that landlords know their responsibilities, and the tenants
Hmm.
know their rights. But also just these are different ways that we're trying to make sure that we can keep affordable housing in Belmont Cragin. And
Well,
then
tell us a little bit more about the neighborhood,
yeah, absolutely.
where
So
it's located, and are there a lot of businesses? Is it mostly residential?
yeah, absolutely. So Belmont Cragin is north of Austin and to the west of Logan Square and Mosa. We are the largest Latina population in all of Chicago, with 82,000 residents. About 80% are Latina or Hispanic, and 30% of the neighborhood is under the age of 19. And
Oh,
we are the second highest in undocumented, residents to Chicago. And so the work that we do is primarily focused on that Latina population.
okay.
And it is mainly residential. We do have a mix of a lot of like convenience stores, corner stores, but really what has thrived in the last couple of years is restaurants. And I think the reason for that is because Belmont Cragin is so diverse. Like, we are not like, um, while we do predominantly have a Mexican population, we like to think of Belmont Cragin as like all of Latin America in one place. We have,
Okay.
it is majority, so it's about 80% Mexican, but then it's about 10% Puerto Rican, it's 3% Ecuadorian, 3% Guatemalan, 3% Peruvian, and the list goes on and on. We have a lot of Colombian restaurants. We have Salvadorian restaurants. We have Brazilian restaurants, and so we the restaurants that we have in those businesses are very, very diverse. And so for that reason, we try to show that to the residents that live here, but also any visitors that want to come and just visit and be able to experience something a little different.
And how do you like showcase your restaurants? How do you, let your residents know that the businesses are there and they need their support?
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry to clarify, are you talking about like how do we do outreach to businesses, or how do we show residents
Yes,
about these existing businesses?
both,
Okay.
both.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a lot of it is just going to businesses in hand, or creating relationships with residents that already live here that know of other residents or other businesses, and making sure that they
Okay,
know, hey, I heard you have a really good relationship with these businesses. Can you reach out, and can you, here are our cards, here is our pamphlets, so that they know, and you can spread the word about the resources that we have. Knowing that, again, we want to meet people where they're at, and so sometimes it's meeting them at their businesses and having meetings there, or sometimes it's calling. There's a digital divide in Belmont Cragin, and so email doesn't always work, but we can call, we can text. Again, we
right.
can walk into places, and so we really try to be very active in our community or with other community partners who know of relationships, to make sure that we are finding these nooks and crannies. And it's the same way with artists that we have. Is we work with schools, we work with the park districts, we work with other community residents to see, hey, we are looking to have an event, and we would love to have a Guatemalan band. So we'll go to Guatemalan restaurants and say, hey, do you personally know of anybody that plays music and would like to have this opportunity? So that's
Mhm.
the outreach that we do. But in terms of letting people know, like, oh, there are these businesses, we try and create like robust marketing through like, we have the corridor ambassador program, who are out in the community cleaning, saying hi to businesses, surveying them, just making sure that they have what they need and they feel safe. But they also have a TikTok account, and they create videos for free to these residents or to these businesses, with their permission, of course. And
Right.
again, meeting them where they're at. The businesses may not have a TikTok account, but CAPS does, and so they can take these
Okay.
videos, and they have a robust following. But then with residents, that's kind of where I come in, with our special events. And so we have, like, for example, a Mercado series where we convert unexpected places into one-time activations, and we turn them into Latin markets. And so we work with
Okay.
retail and small vendors that don't have a storefront, but
Hmm.
they have an opportunity to showcase their work and their products to the community. We work with artists that may have small gigs, right, but now they get the opportunity to perform to 12, 13, 1,400 residents
Right.
throughout the night. And then our food-based businesses as well, where they might want to explore new ways of, new revenue streams of, like, oh, maybe I can cater, maybe I can do this, or here's a new product like a concha sandwich, which is a concha ice cream and then the second half of the concha on top, right? Something that we don't know will work or not, but they want to test these out. And so it's a really nice relationship where residents now get a beautiful community event where they get to experience and just kind of have fun for a night. And then the businesses get to try out a product or get their name out.
Right.
And you know again, being intentional about how we do things, like we do night markets, because a lot of our residents may work in the mornings or they may work in the
Mhm.
afternoons, and so by working it later in the night, 6 to 10, 4 to 10, they're able to go home, relax, grab their families, and then still be able to experience this event that isn't just in the mornings.
So you try to accommodate everybody's schedule at some point.
Absolutely, yeah. Or the ones that matter, which are our residents.
Right,
Hmm.
exactly.
Yeah.
I just wanted to circle back a little bit, and
Yes.
how does Northwest Side CDC support tenants and support landlords? What do you do to facilitate
Right, absolutely.
like
So we do have
a
some rental
relationship?
counselors who can take cases, and so if a landlord is having a tenant that is being problematic, or that is not, they may be doing things that are not allowed in their rental contract or their rental agreement. Then
Hmm.
we intake them, and we ask, and we do ask many questions to make sure that it's not just a landlord or a tenant that is mad at the other, right? We make sure to
Right,
actually get both sides and make sure that this is something that we might need to intervene in, or provide support in any way, right? Sometimes
right,
people just need to vent, and they're actually like, okay, you know what, I may have been you know a little bit angry about this, let me think about this, and they solve it. Or it might be, yes, we do actually need to intervene. Again,
yes,
with we also do hold workshops for both tenants and landlords, so that they know their rights and they know their responsibilities in having these rental units. And then something that has been innovative for us is it's illegal to discriminate against Section 8. But a lot of landlords, who we think of as the CDC, as actually small business owners, because they have this rental unit and it is a revenue stream, but they also have, again, responsibilities to these tenants. So
hmm,
we will sometimes go through and find, you know, places or advertisements that are actually saying they will not accept Section 8, which is legal. And so actually want to work with them. Sometimes we'll email them or call them and say, hey, we're with the CDC. We just want to make sure that that it's actually illegal to say this, or to be biased in any way. And sometimes that's the end of it. Or sometimes we actually do have to take them to small claims court. And instead of actually going actively against, right, the landlord, we try and find deals. So we'll say, how about, you pay a $50 or $100 fee, that goes into this fund to help people. And in turn, all you have to do is take this tenant or this landlord workshop, so that you understand why it's damaging to discriminate against Section 8. Not only is it illegal, right, but we also just want to
right.
educate them so that they know, these are people's lives, and you're affecting it by not, technically following the rules. And
Has
so
that been successful?
it has been extremely successful. Yeah,
Good.
that is with our rental advisor, and but they have been at talks, and they've actually worked with the city, and the city really likes that idea of, like, instead of, right, you're not just punishing someone. That's not what we're looking to do. We're looking to educate, and so by reframing this, it's enlightening for everyone.
Yes, because by educating someone, history might not be repeated then.
Exactly. Yeah. And sometimes they may have more than one unit. And so by, educating them once, now you've affected 3 or 4 units.
Right, right. Can you tell us a little bit about the Creaster Business Incubator?
Yeah. So it's actually pronounced crecer. And so the
Okay,
reason for that is it means to grow in Spanish. So we're trying to
okay,
grow businesses. But yeah, we did the season 1 of Crecer last year, with 2 businesses. It was like a Mexican artisanal shop, and then one was an artist. And so the way that we work with businesses is that we will put a master lease under our name, and then we will, right, everything, all the utilities are under our name as well. And what we'll do is the first 3 months is free, and then the next 3 months, they pay 25% of rent. The next, it's 50. The last 3 months they pay 75% of the rent. And then from there, throughout every single month, they'll do training on marketing, on HR, on making sure that they have their own guidelines or workbooks, that they are, bringing their costs either the same or down, or just making sure that they're building a sustainable business throughout these different educational workshops. um,
so this is for people wanting to start a business.
Yeah, so it's either starting a business, or if they already have an existing business, and we like to create pipelines at the CDC, and so maybe we discovered them for the Mercado series, and they sell X product. But that product is so successful, and we see something in them that they have all their stuff, they have their permitting, they pay on time for these event
Okay.
series. Well, then, we talk to them and say, hey, we would really like you to apply to the Crecer incubator. Well, now they can move into a part of a storefront. So like for season 2, we have rented an old coffee shop, and we're actually having 5 businesses inside of it. So we have a bookstore, we have a jewelry shop, we have a snack shop, a new coffee shop, and one that does, again, artisanal goods. And so
Mhm.
we split it up, the rent, between those 5 as well. And now they have an opportunity to test this out on a longer term basis, as opposed to a one time event. And ideally,
Right.
they would, again, that would present into, now they can eventually rent their own storefront that they own by themselves. And then in, later down the road, they can come back to us and say, we've been so successful, this is a long-term business, I would like to purchase my own storefront, can you help me with
Mhm.
that? Right. And so it's creating a journey for them to eventually at an endpoint where now they're building wealth.
And you're building stability in the community by
Mhm, right.
having these
Yeah.
businesses,
Yeah, these
right?
businesses that are lasting here a long time, right? And then eventually, even after that, it goes, we don't want you to run your business, we want you to be able to manage your business. And now they get their
Mhm.
free time. And again, if they want to retire, which they are more than welcome to do, or if they want to continue to do it or pass it down to their kids or whatever, now this business is an institution, it can stay in the community for a really long time, because it's been so successful and sustainable.
Right, and it has a good, strong foundation.
Yes.
So, one other thing I'd like to ask you about, Fabian, is about the Northwest Side CDC's participation in Chicago Alfresco program.
Yes. Yeah, that's a very exciting initiative, where, for context, during the pandemic, the city created this alfresco like permitting process and outdoor dining, where you could create a temporary dining experience outside if your sidewalk was big enough, if you had the
Mhm.
space, or you maybe even had an alleyway, where now, instead of going inside, and potentially being harmful with COVID-19, you could sit outside and be within guidelines. And what they found was that it was so successful and people loved eating outside, that they were figuring out, okay, how can we make this permanent? And so then you could apply for an outdoor dining that was long term, um, and that was, right, again, next to your business, right? But I think the problem with that is, one, not every location or not every place in Chicago has wide enough sidewalks, because as
Right.
the city has it, right, there are strict guidelines and permitting processes for everything. And also it wasn't equitable, right? So one business might have a bigger sidewalk and they can serve their community, or they may actually just have the money and now they have their own dining experience, versus with the Chicago Alfresco program, it was a way for community organizations to be able to find spots for permanent outdoor dining that served more than one business. So, and that was
Mhm.
actually one of the requirements. It could not be for one business, it had to serve multiple or an entire strip. That
Right.
way, everybody could create this, and it was creating more public spaces. And so,
Mhm.
the CDC jumped on that opportunity. We clearly wanted something like that, and we drove in our executive director's car to every single like nook and cranny, street, alleyway, trying to find a location. And we found that we actually, one, didn't have we don't have like these clusters of businesses like Milwaukee, where it's end to end, it has businesses. But also, we just didn't like, our sidewalks are not big enough. Unfortunately, our neighborhood is very car centric at the moment, and that means small sidewalks and large streets.
Mhm.
And that's too dangerous for people. But we worked with one of our local aldermanic offices, and they were saying, hey, what about this little nub, that's kind of surrounded by streets, but it's not being served, and it's next to residents. And so we looked at it and we were like, this is a perfect spot. And we started to think about, how do we flip this on its head? And so, instead of creating an outdoor dining experience that served existing businesses, what if instead we created an outdoor dining experience and we brought in businesses? And so, very much to the Hispanic and Latino culture, there's a lot of street food. There is, right, there's a the elote cart, there's tacos, there's different foods that you can get while you're walking around in these walkable cities. And so we thought, what if we created spots for our street vendors, for our people to be able to serve food in a safe way, but also now instead of just creating an outdoor dining experience, in the middle of it, we're actually creating a park. We're calling it La Placita. And so now we're also creating a public space for the community to be able to enjoy. And we have a stage, and we're going to get a sound system, and we have grassy areas and seating. And right now everybody gets to enjoy it, as opposed to it just being used for commercial purposes as a dining experience.
And has that been completed?
At the moment, no. So we have been very ambitious with the project that we're doing, and so it's not just seats and tables and maybe a little bit of gating. It is, again, it's staging. It's creating these slots so that the food cart vendors can actually put their food cart and it fits in perfectly. It's creating sustainable and long-lasting public space, as opposed to something that might exactly. Right. And that was our pitch, right? It originally was going to be a temporary 1 to 2 year activation, and the city loved it so much, and Choose Chicago, who funded part of it, loved it so much that they were like, we want to make this permanent. Give us some time. We're going to delay it a little bit, but we want this to be something that's for your community and that lasts longer than all of us.
Sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, thank you. And so, we, at the moment, it has not been built, but we're looking to do a grand unveiling in 2023.
Oh, okay. Not too long.
Right, yeah. And with that, of course, more special events. Like we would love to do farmers markets. We would love to do food truck or just food, food tastings, and then also just a summer concert series as well.
We hope you've enjoyed the podcast so far. We don't want to lose any of the story of Chicago Cares or the Northwest Side CDC. So we're going to make this a 2-part episode. Be sure to come back next week to hear part 2.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Bridging Chicago, as produced by the SATC Solutions Center. Nothing contained in this podcast shall constitute financial, investment, legal, and/or professional advice. No professional relationship of any kind is created between you and the podcast host or guest. You are urged to speak with your financial, investment, or legal advisors before making any investment or legal decisions. Furthermore, the opinions expressed in this podcast are not necessarily the opinions of SATC Solutions Center, SATC Law, or any of its employees. This podcast is created by the hosts and guests' individual capacities. All opinions on this podcast are or have been rendered based on specific facts, under certain conditions, and are subject to certain assumptions, and may not and should not be used or relied upon for any other purpose, including but not limited to, or use in or in connection with any investment purposes or legal proceeding.